Welcome back to part 2 of the Dodge NV4500 rebuild video. We should be able to wrap it all up with the second video, and hopefully we can answer all your questions. If not, please feel free to leave me any comments, and I'll get back to you as soon as I see it. Alright, until then, let's get started. Alright guys, so we're returning to putting the struts in the 3/4 Synchronizer hub, which you saw me press onto the shaft at the end of the first video. And that's what I'm doing here. Here I'm setting on the 3/4 Synchronizer sleeve, so just keep everything in place when I go to set it in the transmission housing. Next, I'm going to be pressing the bearing onto the front of the counter shaft, and that's what we're doing right here. Here I'm going to be putting in the countershaft bearing cup there in the front of the housing. I don't have a fancy bearing or shim installer, so I go old school here. Just showing you put the flat side towards the outside of the case, and then grab a 2x4. Here I'm just stabbing the counter shaft back into the transmission case, setting it on that sleeve I just put in, tip it up on end, then I'm preparing the rear bearing to tap it into place, since I can't get that whole thing in the press. And there we go. It's hard to see right here, but I also drop in the bearing cup for that rear bearing on the back of the counter shaft here, and that is the cover that goes over it. And what I'm doing is getting ready to check the end play in the shaft, which they had really bad end play when I pulled it out. But through the process of using this tool here, I'm able to actually get the counter shaft down to 0.0025 and eventually get the input shaft to 0.002, which is just about exactly perfect. Just takes a lot of time taking it apart, putting shims in, put back together, check it again over and over, which I deleted most of the process in this video because I'm pretty sure nobody wants to see that happen repeatedly. Right here I realized that I had forgotten to put in the reverse idler gear, which is required. So here's a picture of how dirty and nasty it was, or a video I should say, and then I cleaned it up and put it in, pulled out those old nasty bearings, and poof, it's clean. Now when I installed this, I did put in new thrust washers. I just didn't have them featured there in the video. And the end of that shaft is grooved. You'll notice it when you go to take it out or put it back in. And that's made to actually line up with part of that shaft under the retaining plate for the rear of the counter shaft. It's only the one way it can go in, so it's not hard to figure out. hardest part here was just getting the thrust washers to line up so I could get it to drop all the way in. Once you have everything where it needs to be and you've got your lash set right, I may be using the word lash wrong, but you know what I mean. Anyway, you want to use Loctite 242, the blue stuff, on those bolts, and then torque them back down to, I believe it was 30 foot-pounds. And then the counter shaft is pretty much done, except for putting the bearing cap on the other side. Here's the cap I was talking about. It's called the countershaft case bore cap, and in this case it has a line of sealant already on it from the manufacturer, so you don't need to put anything else on there. You just tap it into place. If it doesn't have that, you do need to use Loctite 545. Right here I'm putting in the main input shaft, or sorry, the main shaft in the transmission, and getting things as lined up as I can to start with, and then kind of bump it into position to get all the teeth to set. And there we go. Then I slide in the input shaft with its needle bearings. And unfortunately, I didn't show this on camera. I did show there that the bearing retainer has its own seal on the shaft as well. I did put RTV around the outside of that, and a little bit for the bolts to keep them all situated where they're supposed to be, and torqued it into place. Here I'm putting the struts in the countershaft overdrive for 5th gear. Now I'm lining up and setting into place the 5th gear synchronizer sleeve. Now I'm setting into place the 5th gear friction ring, which is shortly followed by the 5th gear clutch. Here I show you ever so briefly, there's another thrust washer retaining pin that I set in there prior to the thrust washer, and then the needle bearings for the 5th gear assembly. And then I'm going to set it in place. So give it a little spin, just make sure everything's good. Lubed up the friction ring good before I actually put it in. Then I realized that I messed up and pushed that sleeve in too far. And this one gave me a little bit of resistance wanting to go on, but it went on okay. So I was a little confused there. I had to do a little research. That snap ring that was on the back of the 5th gear assembly, I needed to replace it because it's like so worn out that it had groove indentations in it from the gear teeth on the shaft teeth. Anyway, I reached out to Torque King and they confirmed my suspicion about those smaller rings, and the general practice since they stopped, I don't mean they as in Torque King, but nobody manufactures that snap ring anymore. And the last NV4500 that had that type of snap rings was made in 1995, which roughly corresponds with how old my truck is. But since then, they've replaced it with 2 of the thinner snap rings, so that's what we're going to do. Back to the show. I didn't bother recording the whole process here for the input shaft, getting the lash measured out and everything. I'm just showing that I went ahead and put blue Loctite on the nuts for the input shaft as well, or main shaft. And then I retorqued them down as well. What's that? Oh, dead moth. Right here I went back to test fitting the main shaft overdrive 5th gear and the specialty locking ring setup and color to keep it in place. Just wanted to make sure everything was going to work out before we finalized anything there, because once it's on pretty much for good without investing a whole lot more money. To keep the main shaft from spinning while you're tightening this on here, you can lock 2 separate gears. For instance, 2nd and 4th, which is what I did. Lock them both into place at the same time, and they kind of counteract each other, so it doesn't want to let the shaft spin. Now I've cut back to getting the rest of that put on the counter shaft and putting those new double stacked thin rings in place. But we're going to call them thin mints from now on. Here I'm putting the synchronizer back on with the overdrive 5th gear fork. Just had to get everything lined up, tap it into place, and then I can tack in the rolled steel pins with a mushroom head so they can't slide back out later. I just set the camera up to record washing all the black, nasty, horrible things off the inside of the top cover, and I realized when I got pretty much most of it off that I never pushed record. So that's what it looks like now, which is about 1,000,000 times better than it did look. I don't know if you'll be able to see this or not, but hold on, see if I can see what you see. Alright, so down in here, this surface is where the ball of the actual shifter moves around on. You see, it's significantly thick there. Not bad. But this backside not only looks like it's been worn away badly, but actually looks like the lip has been bent back. So I'm going to hold off on replacing this for now. These things run in the neighborhood of $500 just for this top piece. So I'm going to wait. Hopefully it'll hold out until the next time I take this thing out and want to do some work to it. Like, you know, a lot. But it did not have the top boot for this part of it, which is this little guy. Clips right on here. I'm guessing it had rotted away, that or somebody took it off the last time it was opened up, which is just dumb. But then again, a lot of dumb happened to this truck. So anyway, I don't have an actual gasket seal to put on here. I'm not sure if they ever made one. But we're going to do RTV on here, and I'll clean it up so it looks better than what came off of there. But when we go to put this back on, we got to wait until the transmission's back in the truck to put the actual shifter on. But we'll put that in, put that seal on. That'll help keep a lot of that gunk out of there, and hopefully have this guy lasting longer. Something else that kind of threw me off was my rebuild kit came with fork pads. Now these aluminum ones don't take fork pads. These originally did. 92 to 97 had fork pads, but this aftermarket fifth reverse fork, a lot of them are made now where the material is wider and it's made in such a way that they don't need pads and it won't cause any extraneous wear in there. So this is obviously an aftermarket one. It's been replaced. There's not a groove for pads to even sit on, and I actually mic'd it, and these are, don't quote me, my mic's a little bit off, but it was 7.92 millimeters, and the gap in there was like 7.94 millimeters or something along those lines. So super tight tolerance. It's fine. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit more, and then we'll get a gasket on it and get it put on there. Actually, you know what? I'm going to wait on that part until I have that fifth gear nut tightened down. Alright guys, so I just used, now hear me out, I used the wire wheel to clean up the surface. I know, you're probably panicking. Bear with me. 1 second. Alright, so anyway, here's my argument. Yes, this is an aluminum piece, and yes, you know, it's not recommended that you ever use a wire wheel on something that's machined to be, excuse me, you know, real tight fit. But this thing has been off countless times before. It still has layers of sealant from 2 or 3 times ago embedded in there. The surfaces are already chewed up from people sticking screwdrivers in between the two instead of just using the prying points like you're supposed to. And let's face it, you know, it's my truck. I do what I want. But anyway, no, seriously, I have lots and lots of experience running a wire wheel on something. And if you're going to do it, make sure you run with the plane surface. Don't run where you're scoring it between where you hold fluid and where you don't. You don't want to go that way across it because, yes, you are asking for trouble. As long as you're careful not to do that, even on an aluminum surface with a careful hand, and preferably an old tore-up wire wheel and not a brand new one, you'll be alright. Especially when you're using RTV because, well, there's a certain room for error and it's going to fill that up with goo. Alright, so final assembly on this fifth gear, or counter gear for fifth. is something to the tune of 285 to 300 foot-pounds of torque on top of using Loctite 545 and the lock nut kit. I don't have a torque wrench that goes up that high, so we're going to use the 545 and the nut kit, and we're going to put as many ooga boogas as we can put into it. If that means I have to do a pull up from the floor, so be it. But yeah, that's how we're going to do it. And realistically speaking, I mean, there's no way that this should come back apart ever again. Ugh. I'm going to say that's sufficient. Alright. Now, in addition to the Loctite, the specialty lock washer set in there, this lock nut, the other Loctite on this nut, there are keys that go into this nut. So what I can do, the key has an Allen head on one side, a brass key on the end, and a spring. Should it ever start to loosen, I don't know if you can see this little channel here, what'll happen, that starts to turn just a little bit, and that brass key is going to drop down in there and lock it in place. But I don't think we even need that, to be honest. The other one had the Loctite on it, and they had actually welded the nut to the gear, and when I separated that and cut the nut off, I still had to superheat this gear to get it to come off, to get that Loctite to let go. So I know both surfaces were super clean. You know, I have 150% faith in that Loctite. I think we're golden. Right now, some of you are thinking, what? Why are you putting the RTV on both sides? Well, that's because I'm using RTV on both sides and the gasket. Like everywhere else on this truck, it is just so beat up, dinged up, rusted, and abused that I need to be able to take up as much space and material as I can and create the best seal possible. So that's why I did it. So these bolts do not go inside the fluid jacket, so there's no reason to put RTV on them. They do recommend to use 242, so that's what I'll be doing. I just recorded a little ending and realized that my mic was still off. Anyway, except for the final torque down procedure, this bad boy's ready to go back in, and frankly I'm a little more than excited to get that done. So, thanks for sticking with me. Peace. Take care. We'll see you next time. Hey guys, I just wanted to add a little something to this video. I wanted to mention this book that I got from Torque King, and yeah, it was a little on the pricey side. I think it was about 65 bucks after shipping, but this thing has way more information in it than you're going to get from, you know, the factory service manual stuff that's floating around online. The stuff that's out there is vague and sketchy at best. This has a full breakdown of every shaft, every gear, every part, names of it, where they go. I mean, it was invaluable in this process. It took, you know, what would have probably taken me, who knows, weeks to figure out, to doing everything in a day. So, yeah, I mean, I agree, a lot of Torque King's prices are a little high, but some of the stuff that they carry, nobody else has, and I didn't see anybody else out there with a tech manual on how to rebuild a transmission. So, in my opinion, a little pricey, yeah. Worth it, yeah. So, there we go. Hashtag not sponsored. Yeah, some of them. So I was a little confused.